I think through time and persistence and showing him that we could tell his story in a way that honored it, you know? So it wasn't like from the get-go he was like, yeah, dive in. Even when I asked him to do the project, we did a 4 or 5 day shoot as a test shoot and saw where it would go, and their relationship kind of evolved over time. He never really said yes or no to the project until a few years in. We didn't even acknowledge that we were doing it. So it was kind of this slow tiptoe, and then all of a sudden he would reveal more and more, and we'd find out more about his world and chat with his family. So it took 4 years to complete, from like almost literally exactly 4 years from initial conversation all the way till completed film, which for a documentary, as you know, is quite quick, you know?
The thing is, as an artist, he's great, graphic designer. He's a wonderful artist. But how did you know he was worth it as a, for a documentary? It's different to be a great artist and to have that, right? Why is he worth it for you to tell an 80-minute story?
I was drawn to the work first and foremost. There's also a project he did with this photographer, Andrew Painter, where Andrew has photographed him for 17, 18 years of his life. I saw the intimacy that Andrew was able to achieve in that work, and I just had to take a leap of faith that, which is how I've done a lot of my short films as well. I'm intrigued enough by a subject to want to know more, but you don't know where it's going to go. So you have to kind of hold your nose and jump and trust that you'll be able to find your way out of the story, you know? So I think we had originally intended it to be about Geoff solely in his work. And then we realized as the film progressed, equally as compelling was how he lived his life and saw the world as a human. So that was kind of like balancing those things. And that was the true realization of how it became, I think, probably a short film, which is about his work, to a feature film, which is about him as a person and his trajectory and how he's learned to kind of function and move through the world. So
All those questions that you ask him about life and are things that you're exploring yourself.
yeah, I mean, this is a form of self-therapy, if you haven't picked up on that. Even like the film, he talks about it as Dan's film, because it's like it's my version of him. It is him, but it's my version of him. So a lot of the stuff that I was walking through life about, like, I've only made short films and commercials. Could I make a feature film? How can I live my life? Because I have a practice as an artist that I've had for 10 years or so. How can I make my practice more successful or what? So it's, how do you leave a legacy? What is a legacy? What's important? Time, money, family, friends, all these things is just like being able to bounce these things off of somebody who's operating at a pretty high level. Um, yeah, I'm dealing with a lot of stuff. He's dealing with a lot. He doesn't really go to therapy. I do. So it's a lot of these conversations are happening, and then we're picking the best ones to kind of make a film.
Eh, um, the art, his art, you introduce the art as a threat. It gave us continuity. Could you explain that and why? It
It
might be off.
originally, no. I think it's not. It's like actually my original vision for the film was a non-linear film because his life is very amorphous and foggy. So the initial cuts of the film were not linear. There wasn't a through line. It was more of just like, this is his world, dive into it. But we found that you needed a linear thread to see the evolution of the work, to see his struggles as a creative, to see his evolution. So we used the art as kind of a track along with how his life projected and went along. So that was it seems obvious and simple, like, oh, you show the work that he was doing at that point in time, but it actually took some time to come to that structure. We didn't originally want to have a linear structure. It felt too limiting to us. But we fell back on a linear structure because I think you need that through line in order to kind of have something to ground you throughout the film.
And what would you say his biggest quality? I think he's a very real human being, regardless of being a great artist. So for me, that will be his biggest quality. But I don't know. I'm not you're the one who did the movie. I
I
just
think
watched.
it's hard to say one. I would say there's two. He looks through everything as like, how is this authentic to me and to my work? I think we all post on Instagram and have social media. There's like influencers, but he's like, how do I post that's authentic to me? That's a very crass way of thinking about it. How do I make work that's authentic to him? So he's very good at that. And I think he's also very good at thinking about structures of time, what you devote your energy towards, how you live a life. So those two things, like how do you do it authentically, and then what are you choosing to devote your time towards? He's very good at those two things.
So would you say that this film is about a narrative that explores art or explores a human that is expressing himself through art or everything at the same time?
Why do I have to choose? Can't it be both those things? I think we've made a very clear decision early on, maybe a year or two in, that it wasn't just going to be a film about art. That the audience is limited, that the scope of it is limited if you just have it be about art. But if we start having it be about humanity and being a human, it can open it up to a wider audience who then could take learnings from the art and apply it to their own life.
You did two other films before, right? My
Mm-hmm.
Heroes Are Cowboys, I think, and the Black Panther artist ever. No?
I've done a ton, like, yes, I was involved in those two, but I've made like probably 20 others, you know what I mean? And have a practice as a commercial filmmaker too. So had made a ton of short form content, but never a feature film.
And how different was it for you
The
to?
biggest thing is there needs to be an arc, there needs to be growth, you need to have an evolution. You don't need to have those things in a short film. You can, but I think that was the biggest kind of evolution for me, is understanding what makes a compelling story and what can hold someone's attention for an hour and 20 minutes. Um, that seems self-evident, but it's not always. We had a lot of versions of this film that were very different, that had the same information in it, but were just structured differently and didn't work as well. So that process of going from something that has all the information in there and doesn't work to something that does work, that's the process of feature filmmaking that I learned a ton about.
So Dan, if someone wants to make a film about you, what would you say? Would you be
Oof.
generous or?
Uh,
He
oof.
was generous, no? I mean, it took you
He
4 years,
was.
but you.
He's always said to me early on in his career, he wanted to say yes to any opportunity to talk about his work. And I think there is a generosity in that. I'm not sure if where I am on that spectrum. I think,
And Sofia and Spike, how did they help and why were they involved? I know they're friends and no, or
yeah,
they work together too.
Sophia and Geoff had worked together for years. He had done this clothing line, the primary, tons of T-shirts for this clothing line she had in the 90s, early 2000s called Milk Fed. And then he did the titles for Virgin Suicides. And
Virgin,
then,
yeah, sorry, Virgin Suicides. I love that film. Yeah.
yeah, and like the artwork fits the aesthetic of that film tremendously. And then with Spike, he's done 20 years, pretty much everything Spike has worked on in terms of films or side projects or art, or he's had a hand in very little hand here, very big hand here. They've had this relationship. So they didn't obviously, they um, generously said yes to being in the film. And then once Spike had been in the film, I said, could I show you a cut of the movie and see what you think? He generously said yes. And then from that, decided to sign on as an executive producer and help me kind of guide the film along the way.
Cool. In South by Southwest, how was it?
It was a tremendous experience. I had a short film there maybe a decade prior about these two type designers. So to come back to operate on this grand scale with a feature film at one of the best festivals in the world, tremendous experience. And then also we came back, and the day we got back from South by Southwest, we found out that we won the audience award and that people loved our film. It was a fantastic experience.